The pandemic had most things going virtual. This new normal has been difficult to adjust to for everyone, but for students especially, with all the academic activities shifting completely online, it has been specifically difficult. In these pressing times, online learning has been very, very hard on all of us. And everyone tuned in right now will surely agree that the shift and the whole new system is becoming increasingly unbearable with every passing day. Not to mention how the stuff has gotten stricter and more um, worrisome. As such, LSMS has taken the initiative of starting a discourse on this issue and highlighting these common issues that have been plaguing pretty much everybody, but are not still being given enough attention or being actively solved. We have the five esteemed guests joining us for discussion on this pressing yet very important matter. We have with us Dr. Ayesha Mian, the chair of and associate professor at the Department of Psychiatry at Agha Khan University. Oh, you are here in Karachi. I didn't know that. She is also a consulting psychiatrist in general psychiatry and child and adolescent psychiatry. Her research interests include mood disorders and education, research in mental health literacy, and she has developed several clinical services for children with mental health illnesses. We should also welcome Dr. Sarah Shahid, who is a professor of psychology in Foreman Christian College. She has been involved in teaching research and counseling for the last 35 years and is very well known as the pioneer of health psychology in Pakistan. She has previously also worked in prestigious institutions such as Qaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, and Lahore College for Women University. She has also introduced community mobilization by students of psychology through health education. We are also delighted to have Dr. Nasar Sayyed Khan. I'm really sorry if I've pronounced any of your names incorrectly. Um, who currently works at the Department of Psychiatry, Queen's University, as Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Director of Faculty Education, Teacher Education, and Teaching Methods. He has previously also served as the Professor of Psychiatry at the Services Institute of Medical Sciences. He is also a practicing clinical psychiatrist. We are honored to welcome Dr. Tahira Haider, who is our Head of Department for Counselling and Psychological Services at LUMS. She is a registered clinical psychologist with a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from the University of England and has worked in many capacities as a psychologist. Last but not the least, with us we have the esteemed presence of Nida Aslam Roshan, who is the humanistic and integrative therapist, NLP life coach, and bodywork therapist, trauma tension releasing exercise or tree provider. She had her private practice in Karachi for 6 years, where she works with individual aged 16 and above with prime focus on areas such as anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief and loss. She has previously worked as a mental health counselor for Habib University and is also associated with Employee Assistance Programs EAP, where she coaches corporate clients. Now that we have proudly introduced our incredible panel of speakers we have today, let us dive right into the discussion. Most of you interact with or have interacted with students on a daily basis. Surely, ma'am Nadia, you must have plenty of students who would have reached out for support and guidance from our counseling services at LUMS. As such, what are the most common issue you have observed students or parents facing as a direct?
You've said Nadia or Tahira? I didn't get the
Yes.
name.
Any of you can answer.
Nida. I think she meant Nida.
Yeah,
Well,
Nida.
I
I'm
think.
not associated with the university. Okay. Well, I I do not necessarily have just the students coming to me. There are young adults and working professionals as well. Um, but by and large, people who've already had histories of anxiety, social anxiety, or anxiety disorders, I think it's become even more difficult for them to be coping during the times of the pandemic. And there have been a lot of episodes of panic attacks or anxiety attacks, and it's increasingly more difficult because then the social media was playing a role. Then there's your media that has news going on all the time, and then there's the peers and the social circle that's always informing and bombarding you of the information. And by and large, like the fear of uncertainty and fear of loss that has been looming on everybody's heads. So that also a lot of people were struggling finding their private space, privacy, in terms of that there was at least somewhere they would go to for work, or another place they would go to for their academics. But when all the activities are happening all at once at one space, in one space, it becomes difficult for them to create boundaries between the different activities. And then how our culture is, there's family involvement and extended family also sometimes living with you. So family conflicts were taking place, anxiety attacks, and not having a space to vent or go out, not being able to get out of the house. So no change of exposure in that sense. Yeah. So by and large, these were the issues.
Yeah. So I can also add to that. So thank you, Nida. So I can speak for the students at LUMS. So the students that we've been seeing on coming to the center have initially it was social isolation. The connectivity that the campus provides students, and the social sort of outlet that the students get, that was suffering initially. Then there was issues around sleep. So the structure that people have, that university gives, the classes, although we have had online classes, but students are staring, there's increased screen time. Students are, facing the computer all day long. That disrupts their sleep. So there was issues with, sleep disruption. I think also a fear of uncertainty. So when we first transitioned online, which was back in the spring semester, there were some students that were graduating. So there was a lot of fear around what the future would hold for these, new graduates, how long this pandemic would go for, career prospects, things like that. So there was a lot of anxiety and fear of uncertainty. And we do have students, who are high achievers. So the expectations that students had, of themselves pre-pandemic, they had difficulty adjusting that to life post-pandemic. So and kind of having the same expectations that they had before, it wasn't sort of fitting in, and the pressure to be productive. So now they were at home all the time, and there was pressure that we've got all this time and we need to be more productive, and if we are not, sort of how does that sort of fit? So so some of these issues that were coming, I think others, I think Nida has covered, but I think social isolation was a big one. Then there was interpersonal difficulties, I think, which Nida has briefly touched upon. So people, are staying at home most of the time, and some of the, parents are working from home. So there is put the connectivity, internet connectivity issues on top of that. That's another layer of stress that people are having, and the interpersonal difficulties that they're having at home if they have don't have a very supportive environment to sort of work from. If there's a lot of difficulties at home in their interpersonal space, that is going to make studying very, very difficult for them. And then navigating that landmine of stressors around them, where there might be stress at home, in the home environment, and now they've got to deal with the stress that is coming from university, transitioning in the online space. How does that work for some of them? So that was time management was a big one, but I think that has been an issue that our students face anyways, but that kind of coupled with moving on to the online space kind of became a more difficult for them. So how do they sort of manage their time? They're in front of the computer all day, and then not getting enough exercise, no other sort of outlet that would give them time to sort of expend their energy. That sort of added up. So there were a lot of factors that are kind of played into fair uncertainty, interpersonal difficulties, time management, increased increased screen time that led to sleep deprivation, that all sort of tied into increasing the level of anxiety and stress. So students, university students are a population that are at high risk anyway for increased mental health. So we see a lot of mental health disorders, the onset of the mental health disorders kind of occurring within this population, which is the early 20s. And so, I mean, they are high risk anyway for substance abuse, for bipolar and some of the other disorders, but then add this additional layer of the stressor. So we did see stress, anxiety, and depression sort of in the high range, but that is something that we see anyway, but that sort of became quite, pronounced for a lot of students.
And so they were. This question. So I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but the way you are saying everything, that the students are having all these issues, right?
Yeah.
Why do you relate this to pandemic? Because most of the things that you have said, they are already
Yes, I do agree. I do.
With the pandemic, it's a global experience. So not the students of LUMS are having these problems, the students everywhere across the globe. So even I'm working in Canada, but I'm seeing patients in Pakistan. So it's a screen time. I do this virtually. And same goes for the University of Toronto, Queen's University in Canada. They are all doing online courses, right? And the courses are structured in a way that the screen time is not bothersome for the students. Do you think, this is a question now, before I move on, do you think the screen timings for the students of LUMS are more than the rest of the universities?
So I think what I was saying is from my own experience. So I'm talking about sort of what I've experienced in the context of my exposure has been with the students' LUMS. So I'm just speaking from my experience. So I agree with you that this is a phenomena that students across the world are experiencing. So it's not just I suppose, specific to the students at LUMS, students around the world, as well as, this is a global phenomena. We are all, in these uncharted territory, as I was saying to Dr. Sarah earlier. So we are all, in this together. So the increased screen time is not just specific to LUMS, I suppose. It is specific to students the world. That I don't know if there is anywhere around that online study that is. It's just how do we manage that is I suppose talking about the solution to the problem. So we have a problem. I suppose now it is how do we solve this? What do we do? What strategies can we give to these students to kind of assist them to manage a situation which we are all encountering? Yep.
Okay, now I want to ask you one more question before we move on, how to tackle with it. And the question again is that when you students in the LUMS, they come to get the admissions, and this time, were they told about the online thing, or it was changed in between that the students were supposed to be in campus, but then now the university is going online? So was it previously disclosed, or it is planned this year?
So it is planned this year. So the fall semester, from my understanding, is the students who started, the freshmen, they knew that it was going to be online. So in the spring semester, in March, when the pandemic first started, we all were, going on, tracking along as per normal. And then we transitioned online. At that time, no one knew that it was going to be, the semester was going to pan out the way it did. So that
Right.
was something that no one knew. But when we started the fall semester, students were aware well in advance that it was going to be an online semester. So we were prepared for that. But it is difficult. It is a difficult phenomenon. So, for teachers as well as for students, it has been, it's not an easy sort of journey, but I suppose it's like kind of, what do we do now to sort of assist everyone?
For everyone. It's a new thing for everyone. But again, yes, I agree with you that the students were expecting even here that they will be going on in campus and having that social interaction. But unfortunately, because of the admission policies and the COVID and all that stuff, everything changed. So there was a surprise for the students as well. I absolutely agree. Now, my one more question before we should. So the second is that when the students are admitted on for the online courses, is the criteria for admission the same or different in LUMS? Because the rest of the university, they changed their admission criteria. So was the admission criteria same for the LUMS or was it changed?
So, I am the head of counseling and psychological services. So these are very much questions around admissions, and the admissions office would be in a better position to answer those questions. I wouldn't be, but I know that the admission, when you say admission criteria, it depends on whatever their scores are. And I suppose they were aware that it is going to be online. So I don't know the intricate details about how that sort of was structured or how that criteria was. So probably so I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Again, I'm sorry, Tahira, but for me, the basic understanding would be crucial for this process, because when we have a student section for counseling and psychiatry in the university here, which is absolutely a separate and independent entity. And we have about 5 psychiatrists deputed for that specific section. And there are about 2 psychologists and social workers. There are about 7 of them, so lots of big number, who are just doing this process. So the reason why I'm interested is that when we know the magnitude of the problem, then we can handle it appropriately. If we don't know the magnitude of the problem, then the handling is difficult, right? So the last question that I wanted to ask you before again, I feel that we should move on, is that when you say that the students are staying home and they are doing the online courses, right? So when they are on campus, we know which student is actually behaving how. Online situation is different. We don't know which student is behaving how, because they are just coming in and going out. So when they are physically present on the campus, lots of gossips and things carry on, and people do understand that, oh, ye to aisa talanga tha, ye gadbad thi, ye to addict hai, things like that. But now when you are absolutely online, we don't know those aspects of their problems. Do you think, is there any way that the LUMS is trying to organize those things to assess their psychiatric or mental health issues before their admission? No.
I think there was talk, and I'm not sure if that is being implemented, but there's an Office of Inclusion and Accessibility that was going to get like a full we don't want to be asking too many probing questions, but sort of asking them questions around if they have got pre-existing mental health, so that we would be more prepared in terms of accommodations and concessions for the students if they were, to ask during the semester if stuff did come up. We would be, equipped to provide, to assist them psychologically, as well as in terms of their academic performance, give them the extra support.
There is
maybe
mental health question in the admission.
Again, that's an admissions questions. I do not have any sort of cross kind of interaction with those people. Yeah, that office.
Okay. May I add something?
Yes, please.
To the first question. So,
Yes.
and as Dr. Nasser was also saying, in the last semester, that was the spring semester, we know that we were going in the face-to-face mode, and then almost in the middle of the semester, there was a lockdown, and then we had to shift. We took about 10 days to 15 days to prepare for the online classes, and then we shifted to the online classes. So initially it was, and we are talking about the students here, but it was stressful for both students as well as the teachers,
Mm.
because some of the teachers were okay, tech savvy. They were already using smartphones, working on their laptops, using multimedia in the class. And some teachers, there are people who have never used a smartphone for
Mm.
emailing. So that the level of the grip of the teacher over technology also affected the students. So for the students, first of all, there was a lack of, initially, a loss of human connection. So how do we
Mm.
get connected? Then we thought, oh, okay, we need our WhatsApp groups to be more active. We need to, many of us were not using Zoom.
Mm.
Some were using Teams. Or, but as compared to that, today, in this semester, fall, I think everybody is much more better equipped. They have grip of
Mm.
technology. But
Absolutely.
students initially, the very first thing, apart from human connection, not being able to see friends, classmates, and their teachers,
Mm.
because they come to our offices and discuss a number of things, personal matters, all sorts of personal matters. So they were not able initially to do that. And then having resources, everybody needed a smartphone, everybody needed or a laptop,
Mm.
uninterrupted power supply, Wi-Fi at home. And at times, I mean, I felt bad for students who would say, मैं भी अपलोड नहीं कर सकती, मैंने 5:30 पे करना था, लेकिन मेरे
Mm.
अब्बू कार्ड लेने के लिए गए हुए हैं, तो मैं कार्ड से फिर अपना फिलअप करूंगी और फिर मैं internet को access कर सकूंगी. So these sorts of issues emerged, I think, in the first 2 weeks after the lockdown. And
Mm.
then gradually, a new thing which I felt as a professor was that we got more close with the students. At least in my
Mm.
case, I can say that I was available on WhatsApp for WhatsApp calls. At times, I would make
Mm.
wake up calls to 2 or 3 students because I knew that they were like that, or maybe they were working for call centers, working at night. They could not wake up early in the morning for a class at 8 o'clock or 9. We were told by our HOD that we should not arrange classes early in the morning because we don't know what is happening in people's homes. So,
Mm.
and not everybody has a big, large enough home where everybody has a separate room. So if they have to talk on phone or laptop, वगैरह वगैरह. So we tried our best to facilitate the students. Students were under more stress in the first 2 weeks, and so were the teachers. But I think by the end of the spring semester, everybody got tuned and things got streamlined.
Mm.
And this semester, we knew that we had to do these things.
Mm.
And in my university, as I told you earlier, we are using the blended. So we are teaching 50% of the students in the classroom and 50% of them are sitting at home, and you
Mm.
are talking to them. And then you have to be good with the camera because you have to have the lecture recorded for them. So, but
Mm.
I would say, and one last thing for this thing, I felt that our younger generation, our children are very, very much protected. And this was perhaps the first time in their life that traumatic experience at a national level had taken place. If I talk about my generation, we saw 2 wars, at least I saw the first one and the second one. And I could remember the same fear when the lockdown took place on the very first day. But after a few days, we were okay. But our children were still, they were behaving differently, especially those who had to upload their work in time and meet deadlines. So I think now things are much better on both sides for students and as well as teachers. But the problems that we are going to discuss later on, yes, the problems are there, but we are better off today
Mm.
as teachers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sayan. I think this discussion has really been helpful in sort of, pointing out those major problems that do occur in an online semester. That idea of this disconnection between people, and also how different people are at different levels because of their access to online technology. And then, as Dr. Asar mentioned, there's also the idea of extra screen time that has been affecting us. And so, the difference in the lack of sleep or sleep cycles are also disrupted because of that. So considering we have a lot of students that are attending this session, I think what I would like to ask first is what advice you basically have for us, or some things that we should be incorporating into our own routines at this point to better be able to deal with this time. And I think we should start with Dr. Ayesha, if you could.
Sure. So thank you so much, Priya, for that question. The other people had really talked a lot and very comprehensively about some of the first question that was asked. So I didn't have anything else to add. First of all, thank you so much. I tweeted about this as well and put this on my Instagram as well, that all kudos to you and power to you all, because as a math society, you're talking about mental health. And I think that's just amazing. So well done. I'm very happy. It's very heartening to see that students are beginning to understand the need to talk about mental wellness. So it's not necessarily talk about mental health disorders, but really speaking from a place of prevention, that this is something that we are all looking at. So what is it that we can do to have a very open conversation about it? So I'm really heartened with that. In terms of what is it that you all can do? Well, one of the things which is so hard for your generation, perhaps some of us to do as well. I know just before we all started, we were talking about how our weekend has not yet started. So this is like towards the end of Saturday, and yet our weekend hasn't started. So I think we've all gotten into this habit of not being able to maintain some sort of a work-life balance, and then because there is no work-life balance, I think it's so important for us to be mindful of balance. So nahi ho sakta, lekin is there a way that we can integrate it, but that it's not affecting us in a way that even when we are not working, we're constantly thinking about work. And when we are working, we're thinking about sleeping or eating or doing some fun activity. So really not being able to, kind of staying in the moment. And that piece, I think, is just so important for all of us to be able to figure that out, and how are we going to integrate that piece. So I think the biggest challenge for all of our students right now, and I say this to all of my patients that come to me, and I say this to my kids as well. They don't listen. My patients listen to me a lot more than my own kids too. But it's maintaining some sort of a schedule to your life, right? So is it possible for you to get a good night's sleep, to say that, okay, 11, 12 is the most, I'm not going to stay up till 2, I'm not going to stay up till 3, because my next class tomorrow is going to be at 10, तो आज मैं 3 बजे तक जाग सकती हूँ, कल जो है नहीं अभी सुबह 8 बजे उठना है तो आज मैं 1 बजे सो जाऊंगी. That's not good healthy lifestyle. So see, being able to maintain some sort of healthy lifestyle, eating well, sleeping at the right time, I think that is the biggest challenge, which has been taken away because we are not attending and we're not going to structured classes and, physically going up and getting up in the morning. So think about that. Do get up and, wash your face and change, out of your PJs when you're sitting for your online classes, because that helps. These are small, tiny things, but changing, wearing the right kind of clothes and getting out of bed and maybe going to another room where you're sitting. I think all of those things are helpful for your mental wellness as well. So think about some of those, and then also integrating, some sort of physical exercise. I know COVID की वजह से gyms बंद हो गए, football खत्म हो गया, swimming खत्म हो गई. So what are you all doing for your physical wellness? Doing some sort of physical exercise, whether it's at home, yoga hai, mindfulness hai, cardio hai, whatever else biking hai. So please do integrate some of those things into your lifestyle. I think that those are absolutely quintessential for continued mental wellness.
Thank you so much. If anybody has anything else to add, any other advice you guys think that would be useful to us, please feel free.
Can I add a few things?
Yes, sir, please feel free.
Okay, so what Dr. Ayesha said, it's summarized marvelously. So that the good part is that you have to fix up a routine. So your sleep is important, right? You have to sleep properly and sleep for proper number of hours if you really want to be healthy. Exercise is the most important component. No matter what happens, whatever the COVID has done to us, it has done to everyone. We have to make sure that we exercise. So exercise never means that you have to be in a gym. You can plan your day, whatever way you want to do, that is important. And as again, the tricky component, the recreation. So the weekend is already there, but we haven't started our weekend. That's important. So for the recreational purposes, there has to be an outlet, an appropriate outlet just for the recreation, get together and make sure that you are doing something which is fun. Now, watching the screen all the time, of course, sometimes it is fun, sometimes it is not, but making something that will make your life happy with doing some activity is important. So students opt for a number of things, and I always encourage them to opt for these things, like having a pet, right? Or going out for a walk, or having a get together in the backyard of some family. So always keeping the social distancing, but having a barbecue night where six people can have a get together all around again, some kind of a grill, chatting, talking, communicating, and keeping yourself into the bubble. Don't go out and beyond the bubble, but having that social contact and setting up an appropriate routine. So just adding this thing to what Dr. Sach said.
Yeah, I'd like to also add a few points there. I think you both have really covered a lot of areas. One thing that I really suggest my clients to do is, some mindfulness exercises. Like nature just tends to help so much. If you have plants in your house, you don't have a garden, that's fine. You have a balcony, you have plants. If no plants, doesn't matter. Just step out in the nature, even if it's like open sky. Using your five senses, just connect with the nature, connect with the universe, and feel that breeze on your face. Look at the birds, listen to the sounds, notice the smells, temperature, and just it helps you become connected to the present moment instead of rushing to the future or to the past. So it really grounds you. So yeah, mindfulness or connecting with nature is one area. Then it's very important to also have a separate space to study. Studying from your bed, studying from your room, not a good idea, because then your mind is unable to differentiate between a resting space and a working space. And you really need to create that distinction. So no matter whatever little space you can find, just find another space to study. So a lot of people can go, go on studying for an hour. Some people need breaks in between. So, everybody is different. You really need to figure out what works for you. So you really need to check and explore what's working for you best. Maybe sitting down for an hour works for one person, maybe it doesn't work for you, and that's okay. You can break it down into chunks and do it that way. A lot of times, people also use gadgets or laptops or phones as a distraction, and those are distractions from anxieties or fears or whatever. It's okay to process those emotions and sit with them. If you want to release through tears, let it out. That's fine. There is no shame in that. And one last point that I'd like to cover is that, social media, I myself saw so many negative news, not information, news traveling on the social media or even on the TV. And I myself made a conscious choice of turning those notifications off. so that I wouldn't keep revisiting them. You know, it's one thing to have important information and being aware of what's going on globally. And it's another thing to know that this is something of a trigger and I shouldn't expose myself to it unnecessarily. It's, you know, whatever the numbers are in terms of cases or the casualties, you really don't need to know that. So if it's bothering you, if it's a trigger, just turn that off. If you feel that on the news, on the TV, there's something that's bothering you, disconnect yourself from that energy. Walk out of that room. If somebody is engaging in that of conversation, all these things you'll have to be really mindful of to make a conscious choice. And most importantly, breath. Taking a good breath is so important, and just, you know, exhaling and letting it go. You take one hearty breath and it just releases all of those anxieties out. So really focus on breath. A lot of times, I noticed that in me. You know, I'd be holding my breath until I started training as a trauma-informed therapist. I noticed that I was holding my breath, and that just tends to constrict and contract our muscles and the tension within the body, and it just keeps every stress inside. So the minute you take a hearty breath and let it out, it just relaxes your nervous system. So every time, just become aware of your breath and let it out. Okay.
Thank you so much. Like all of that helps so much in sort of like, you know, trying to decide how to progress going forward. Now, we did have some questions coming in from the students themselves, and considering that you did talk about, you know, making deliberate choices, and we've sort of talked about how it's very different to make for separating those two spheres. One of the questions that was asked was that in an online semester, it's even harder not to procrastinate, just because, you know, you have access to so many things and the lines are very divided. We have a very varying schedule, so it's very hard not to procrastinate. So any tips on avoiding that? Dr. Tahira, if we could start with you.
So one of the things that I always recommend people to do is, you know, do timed study in chunks. So if you time yourself, use a timer. So if you're going to be, you know, take 25 minutes, it's called the Pomodoro method from memory. So you study for 25 minutes, and then you take a break for 5 minutes. Then you study for 25, take a break, and set a timer. And in that timer, if there's any thoughts that are coming to you in terms of, you know, checking the email or doing, because that can actually cause us to get distracted. And when, you know, those distractions are kind of avoidance. So procrastination is, there's a difficult task that we have, and we procrastinate because sometimes also comes from perfectionism. So if we want to do things at a really high standard, we procrastinate, so we avoid. And when we say we avoid, we tend to do activities which are less taxing, but then also give us a lot of pleasure, and we can, you know, start spending a lot of time doing those activities. So and then of course the day is gone, and before you know, you've spent half the day browsing the internet, checking emails, doing all the less productive tasks, and the task that you set yourself out to do, that is that's not been done. And, you know, people start thinking, oh, I've had such an unproductive day. So if you've got emails coming or other distractions, whilst you are doing that task and you've set the timer on for 25 minutes, you just write it down. Instead of actually actioning or doing those tasks, just say, okay, I'm going to check my email, just write it and continue with the task. So 25 minutes, the timer goes off, you take a break or attend to the other, you know, email or whatever other distraction is. Reward yourself in those 5 minutes. Do something nice for yourself, but don't make those 5 minutes turn into half an hour or 30 minutes, and then, you know, that can start eat into your time. So, and I think people say, you know, we need motivation first to actually start doing the tasks. So my advice to people always is that motivation doesn't come walking, you know, knocking at the door, you know, here, hi, I'm here, motivation. So it doesn't work like that. You actually have to take action for you to get motivated. So do small steps. So if you do something small, that'll actually make you feel better, and that will make you feel motivated to do more. So that's how you do, and set realistic tasks, goals for yourself. If you set yourself a task or a goal that I'm going to, students say I'll smash the entire assignment today and I'll do complete 2,000 words today. It's not going to happen. Maybe just, write 500 words, 300 words, and set realistic goals that can be done, and then maybe reward yourself and then come back to it. And that small action is going to motivate you you've written those 300 words. Now you've got, you're feeling stimulated, you've got the juices flowing, and now that will motivate you to do more and more and more. But if you set yourself the task, I'm going to do 2,000 words and I'm going to write the essay to such a high standard, and you sit down at your desk and you feel paralyzed because the thoughts are I've got to do it. I've got to do the 2,000 words today. The clock's ticking, and I've got to do it at a standard which earns me an A++. And that's really anxiety provoking. So just set yourself realistic tasks. Time yourself. Do study. In a manner that is timed, so you're accountable for that. Give yourself some reward at the end, but don't make those rewards turn into hours and hours of unproductive time for yourself. So structure it in a day, scheduling your time so you're accountable, what you are doing. And also sometimes, students think that if I'm not doing something, that's also being unproductive. So what does unproductive mean? If you worked hard and you're giving yourself some downtime, which is, half an hour of just watching TV, that is also productive in a way. So what does also kind of understanding what productive and unproductive is. Sometimes you need that break, and that is actually productive. You need that break to become productive, to re-energize and to do productive work. So kind of, seeing what your expectations are and being kind to yourself as well. If you're going to be self-critical, you're going to activate that fight, flight, and freeze response, which is going to, that alarm system is going to, if you're going to have those self-critical thoughts, which are quite negative, what's that going to do? Negative thoughts will lead to negative emotions. Negative emotions will lead to behaviors that are avoidant. So if you feel anxious, you're not going to be wanting to approach those tasks. That's going to turn into avoidance, and that looks like procrastination. So, being kind with your being compassionate, what would I say to a friend who was in the same shoes as myself, so kind of using that voice of reason, I suppose, having, and also keeping sight of what's the bigger goals inside, what are my values? We are all struggling here, and it's difficult times for all of us, but I can't control what's happening out there in the world. I can't control the world economy. I can't control the pandemic. But what I do have control over is how I choose to respond to what's happening in the right here and right now. So we only have control in the right here and right now. We can't control the future. We can't control what other people are doing with what's happening in our environment, but we do have control is in the right here and right now. So if we work on that, then the future will take care of itself.
May I just quickly add something? So thank you, Tahira. That was excellent. And I want to put out there that I'm one of those that has a very hard time staying organized, right? I procrastinate, and I've always done that, and I always leave things for the last moment. So I think it's also important to know yourself, like how you work. But I want to reiterate that kindness and compassion piece, because if things don't work out the way you wanted to, and if you were not able to finish things in those 25 minutes, or if you kind of got delayed on something, it's okay. It's perfectly okay. So being kind to yourself, that self-compassion, I think that's such a big piece that's been missing from this whole pandemic conversation and narrative that's been going on. There are all of these people that are saying, oh, it's the pandemic, you're stuck at home, so aapne best cook bhi ban jana hai, aapne best painter bhi ban jana hai. It's like, this is the right time to learn all those skills, and then I'm going to read Homer's Iliad, and I'm going to read all those classics, I'm going to read them now. And then suddenly by the end of it, because you're not able to do that, don't underestimate this trauma, right? It's just really taken a toll, not just on us, on your family as well, on your school, on your teachers, on your everything. And it affects us. We absorb it. So it's okay to kind of say, I tried. Yes, I couldn't do it. Doesn't matter. It's okay. I'll try again the next time. So learn how to be kind to yourself, and then you'll be kind to others too. But that self-compassion piece, don't lose sight of that.
And also just adding, that's wonderful reflection there, Dr. Asha. Also just kind of being flexible and adaptive in our thinking. So if we have really rigid way of thinking and sort of rules for ourselves, like I should do this and I should do this and I must do this. And if we don't, then we feel like we failed. So maybe, looking at those costs of those shoulds, perhaps I prefer to do things this way. And if I don't do, as Dr. Asha was saying, it's okay. Because the cost of those, if we set really high standards and have these rigid rules for ourselves, as I should and I don't, and kind of, as Dr. Ash was saying, it's a pandemic. We are going through trauma, so things are not going to look the way they looked pre-pandemic. And if we have the same rules for ourselves as we did before, then how do they align? Our expectations also need to sort of change of ourselves and of those around us as well.
Okay, may I add? So all of you have said wonderful things, and yes, self-compassion is very important, and setting easier goal for yourself. So make easier, smaller goals, smaller targets for yourself. When you will achieve those targets, you'll feel happy and fulfilled. At the same time, for a moment, students, change your perspective, change your perception. Don't consider online classes as a stressor. Take it as a facilitator for a moment. Let's see how it works. Because it has been, there are so many times when we as students desire that, oh, मुझे university काश मुझे ना जाना होता, मुझे lectures वैसे ही मिल जाते. So Abhi, you have all, you don't have to get up early in the morning, get ready, just to change our perspective. So there are so many things which are actually making your life easier. So it's a facilitator in a way that the loose ends that you had and the tendency that I have and you have for procrastinating. So it is making us being more organized, do things in time. And I don't know about everybody, but as an times we are learning, then you should not take it as a stressful thing. Um, you are getting for talking and the counseling while lying in your bed. तो ठीक है उसको easy लो आप. Things have been made easier for you. Everything is now placed on the LMS. Previously, maybe teachers didn't give you PowerPoint slides, but now they're giving you everything. The lectures are being recorded. You can replay them again and again, and you will never miss anything. So just get it out of your system that this is something stressful. This is just a new thing that we have learned. This is a new skill. And also, whenever you have spare time, as Dr. Nasser also said, having pets, if you have a pet, it's great. And if you don't have a pet, please look after the stray cats outside your place. In this cold weather, you will find so many cats who are looking for food, and it is very therapeutic when you pat a cat and when you love a kitten. It's very, very therapeutic. Learn to paint. I joined a class, online class on painting. So I thought I wanted to learn watercolors. So I learned watercolors during this pandemic. So learn some new skills, which gives you a good feeling. And as Nida said, gardening, mindfulness, to meditate. I know many people have started yoga during this time. So do something which even you can do it in your own room. You can do aerobic exercises in your room. And for a moment, stop taking it as a stressor. Take it as a facilitator, a new teacher.
Thank you so much to all of you. I'm really glad that you sort of talked about flexibility because going like the next area sort of I wanted to go into is obviously a major component is exams and testing. And now in an online setting, there's very limited invigilation possible. And so how teachers have sort of accommodated for that is to make like, even stricter systems. There's like smaller time limits, those kind of things. And that really adds to the stress and anxiety that we face at this point in time. Also because like some people may not have equal resources, or like at that time if you have any kind of problem with that, it's really stressful. So what I would like to ask is, going forward, what are some ways that we can improve testing and test taking without compromising on health and learning both? So how can we accommodate for both of them? Dr. Nassar, if you could start us off there.
Okay, so testing, you means giving an exam, right?
Yes, exams, quizzes, any kind of like, marked component that
Okay.
has time limit on it. Yeah.
Wonderful question. I think lots been said how to make sure that you are geared up with all the coping strategies. That is important. For me, as a psychiatrist, I will have just 2-3 basic suggestions for all of you. One, if you think that you are not able to cope well, if you think that you have some issues in the examination or other things, what last time the other speakers were saying, talk to other people. So talking is ventilating. Ventilating is getting answers from other opinions, and then you have a way to move forward. So the most important component is that if you feel you are stressed up, if you feel you are upset, if you feel you are not able to cope, if you are procrastinating a lot, or any of these problems, then you should talk to someone. Mental health is unfortunately a very complex situation. Our mind plays so many games that you cannot imagine. This mind is very, very tricky. This morning I was talking to somebody else, and I was just telling them that at one time you have 600,000 thoughts coming to your mind, and these thoughts are generated with the electrochemical gradient and impulses, and it is a physical thing. So your thoughts, your memory, and all of that is a physical thing that is happening inside our brains. So there is an electrochemical gradient. So you are all math students, and you should understand that just like mathematics, this brain is a physical thing. The thought process is a physical thing. And if you are not able to streamline it to have a comfortable thought process, comfortable living, comfortable life, comfortable education, then this means there is something wrong with this physical stuff and you need to address it. So talk to someone, get a professional help if needed. There is you should not be ashamed seeing a psychiatrist. You should not be ashamed seeing a psychologist. In all the developed words, मैं छोटी सी लोकल लैंग्वेज में मिसाल देता हूँ. ये एक लतीफे के तौर पे इसको समझें और सीखें कि इस शहर में जिसमें मैं रह रहा हूँ, यहाँ पे 2.25 लाख की आबादी है, और इस 2.25 लाख की आबादी के शहर में तकरीबन 76 साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं. कितने साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं बेटा? 76 psychiatrists for a population of 225,000. In Pakistan, the total number of the psychiatrists across the country for 260 million people is 500. This is the state of affairs. We don't consider it important, but it is important, right? Now, considering this city where I'm living, we have in whole of the city 41 night barbers. They call themselves hair designers. Well, yes. Imagine एक शहर में 2.25 लाख की आबादी के ऊपर 41 नाई हैं, लेकिन 76 साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं. So the value of mental health, and we fail to understand as a student that this is important. Our mental health is important. So when you are studying, when you are preparing for exam, and if you're not coping well, you need to talk to someone. You need to talk to someone professional. And if there is a need, see a psychiatrist. You should not be ashamed of it. So coping is difficult. I agree. Examination is difficult. But for me, mental health is the most important component, just like a physical health. So अगर आपको बुखार हो जाता है तो आप पैनाडॉल की गोली खाते हैं. सो अगर आपको टाइफाइड हो जाता है तो आप डॉक्टर के पास जाके टाइफाइड की दवाई खाते हैं. लेकिन अगर आपको एंजाइटी हो जाती है, या आपको डिप्रेशन हो जाता है, या आपको ऑब्सेशन हो जाते हैं, या आपको फोबियास जनरेट हो जाते हैं, फिर आप किसी डॉक्टर को क्यों नहीं दिखा सकते? फॉर यू, जस्ट रिमेंबर, I want to convey it very clearly. Mental health issues are actually this, just like the physical health issues, and they should be addressed properly if you really want to cope well. Now, what the strategies you have to adopt to overcome the stress of the exam, which is, again, it's been told by Tahira, Dr. Ayesha Mian, and other people. I don't want to go over them again, but focus on your health first, then prepare for the rest.
Yes, thank you. Actually, in this question, what I was trying to sort of focus on is basically how testing can be adapted to this new system in a way that it would be less stressful. So in a way that would not compromise on health as well or on learning. And so if any of the other speakers have some insights, I'd be able to propose.
Fariha, I'm trying to understand your question if it's directed at finding solutions from the perspective of like teachers, professors.
Yes.
Have you discussed these concerns with them? What's been their response?
Like essentially, the main problem that comes up is like obviously testing is an important component, and so they believe like in an online semester it's very hard to invigilate it and to sort of look at that. So to counter that aspect of invigilation, what they try and do is give us like smaller time limits or try and make the test tougher, just like sort of to counter those aspects. But then that means that there is a sort of an additional stress on us. So that is sort of what we want to talk about how.
May I add, Fariha? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
So what I have learned is, yes, when we give quizzes with a time limit, and then they have, because we want to control cheating, etc. also. So, but I personally, what I felt was in my case and in the courses that I'm teaching, I felt that creative problem solving was the best strategy. Give them questions in which they can't do cheating. They have to write their own original opinion and original analysis. It can be something very short also. It doesn't have to be review of a book. So, but I think that can be a good option because it makes it interesting also. And Bahaj, you, yes. So I think so. In such cases, if we give them creative problem solving or analysis, then we can give them more time, and it can be more flexible, and there is less chance of copying each other's work.
I think I think that's really Dr. Sarah. I think she's kind of hit the nail on the head. What I did for my students, I can only speak from my own experience. I had a lot of quizzes. I used to have quiz components and exam components in my subject. But with the transitioning of the online semester, I actually had to change the way the course was structured to facilitate that, because quizzes can work when we are in person, face to face, but in the online space, you don't know what sort of connectivity the student has, if the internet kind of dies halfway through the quiz, or what sort of issues they might have, the electricity outages might happen, so who knows. So I actually changed it. So the component, the testing component, I made it more to be critical thinking based, more essay focused, which would still, and I, as Dr. Sarah was saying, so made it more creative. So one of the components I had was get them to watch, they had to identify psychological disorders. So I had to make them watch different movies and then come up with, psychological disorders from the characters of these different movies. So they could actually, have fun with those assignments, but still engage in it in a way that would allow the learning that I wanted to happen for that subject. So it would entail some sort of, extra work on part of the teacher. But then again, all subjects don't look the same, and I can't speak for all, subjects and all teachers, because some subjects might require those quizzes. I can't say, but I can only speak from, the humanities, and probably this my particular subject was I actually changed it, and one might have to change that to facilitate the transition into the online space, because exam. Again, I had a take-home exam for them, not the actual exam, which was an open book, but then again, that had to be changed and structured. So teachers would have to think outside the box, and sometimes even collaborate with the students. So collaborative learning. So I learned from my students from the fall, spring semester, some feedback that I used to structure the course that I designed this semester. So I think it would have to become a bit more collaborative, in a way that, you are taking feedback from the students and using that to make the material for the students that will allow them to feel engaged, as well as a teacher, what do we want the students from learn? What are the learning outcomes? So yeah, so I think we can't actually give you an answer which would be speaking for all the teachers and all the subjects, because it is going to look, they might have lab components in it, and I don't know what that would entail. Quiz component and the extra stress.
But it's really, I think the onus is on the teachers. So what has happened is that one has to understand that online teaching is not teaching face-to-face work online. We'll all have to learn how to create online modules, how to create online teaching sort of, programs, because they're done just very differently. There's a whole sort of science to that, right? On about students पे इतना वो stress नहीं होना चाहिए, वो इस वजह से हो रहा है because again we don't know how to test with online teaching. But I think my sense is the way the world is going, like I'm a science person, right? But everything that I want is available on Google, so I don't need to memorize anything. So I'm okay with open book tests. I need to understand कि जो मेरे पास Google में और इस phone के अंदर सारी information है, उसमें से how am I going to take out the stuff that I need, critically appraise it, and then transfer it to my patient, right? उसके लिए आप मुझे open book exam दे दें. So if we are able to develop tests that now, take like listen, and now what the pandemic has done is, a pandemic आया, किसी के O level exam नहीं हुए, किसी के A level exam नहीं हुए, किसी का metric का exam नहीं हुआ. So we really just realized that testing, as we did before, is really obsolete, or it could easily be done without, right? कोई students, like, we managed to, okay, somebody said here कि इस year admission criteria में उन्हें SATs नहीं देखे, LUMS में, right? I just read it in the chat, and that was not taken. So वो भी चला गया, SATs भी चले गए and stuff. So I think it's time to kind of, now look at newer ways of thinking and kind of move on with the times and say, hey, we're ready to give students open book exams, and let's figure out how are they able to critically analyze these things and use what information is available in a way that kind of, helps the brain.
Absolutely. I just...
Tahira, can I add?
Hanji, of course.
You being a counselor for the LUMS students, maybe, I'm sure they take an input from you at the end of every semester regarding, some academic concerns that the students may be having. Perhaps you can put forward, different ways of testing and giving exams. For example, case studies. That's more critical thinking than, just reading of the book, or remembering material, or yeah, so something on those lines. Or
I
maybe
think,
focusing more on the quality rather than quantity. So maybe if it's difficult, then having focusing on a fewer chapters rather than so many chapters and making it difficult. So maybe quality over quantity, or maybe quantity over quality, a compromise on either of the two. So yeah, maybe as a counselor on their campus, perhaps you can put forth those ideas.
I can definitely speak to, because there's a whole department for academic advising. I can definitely speak to the head of academic director, Bilal Essen, and talk to him about that. But again, it does come down, as Dr. Ayesha was saying, structure their course, and a kind of courses that were going for the teachers, which was being done by the Institute of Learning at LUMS, teaching the teachers on how to structure online courses during the semester break. So there was intensive sort of classes, workshops that were being given to the teachers. So, how to structure the courses before in preparation of the fall semester. So there was a lot of work that was being done behind closed doors. But then again, it's up to the instructors. So we can, LUMS was taking the initiative of teaching the instructors that instruction is going to look very different, teaching is going to look very different, and we need to be equipped and prepared. And some teachers did change, but others didn't. And I think, again, just with what Dr. Ayesha was saying, quizzes and all these things are all great, but everything is now available online. And when I teach, mental health disorders, we have a DSM for that. I don't know all the disorders by heart. I use the diagnostic manual when I'm, seeing patients. So why are we, it's all about memory, the quizzes and the exams, it's all memory at the end of the day, but conceptual understanding, that I think is more important for the students. And that can happen clearly with, if we change the instruction to, more of critical thinking based, which is more essays, more take-home exams.
Thank you so much.
Maybe a little. I would add just, I think, two sentences. Yes, I agree with what Dr. Aisha said and what Dr. Tara was saying. But as I said previously, why I think this semester is going to be better than the previous semester is that throughout the summer, teachers had been trained. Most universities have worked hard on this, on online teaching and how to do synchronized teaching or unsynchronized, hybrid, blended, distant, face-to-face, together. And quizzes had been, and exams have been, a very important topic in those trainings and discussions. But as you said, it's up to the teachers. But definitely this time is going to be better than the previous semester. People are better equipped now this time.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I do believe like the system did evolve a bit. Like the longer we are online, so it'll be really interesting to see how this impacts like teaching as a whole. I think we should move on to the last question, and this actually came in the chat, so I felt like it was very important to address it. I will just read it out loud. What if my family's behavior towards me is controlling, where they're making my important decisions themselves, and that is disturbing me quite mentally? How do I focus on my studies in such a case? I don't want to hurt my parents either by disrespecting them, but it's not letting me study or do anything at all. So, any advice you may have for that particular student?
Yeah, I'd like to go first now. Um, Boundaries is one major issue in Pakistani family systems, I understand, and especially when everybody is like home at the same time. It's a really good idea to respectfully, and you have to really put it out there and tell them what's really going on. You have to tell them that, I really need to finish my assignment, or, that's something urgent that I need to do. But let's sit together and have a conversation. Give them a time that you will get back to them. Okay, and then you go do whatever, so they will have something to hold on to. It's not like you're just disappearing, so it's like a win-win. They know that you'll be going back to them, and you will also have time to finish your assignment or whatever.
Right. If I may, like, okay, so the question mentioned specifically that they were being controlling or making decisions for her. And so they also added as an elaboration there is something like trying to get them married when they don't want to. So something as major as that, when you have something like that looming over you, how do you still try and deal with your academics, or how do you deal with something like that? So how do you deal with parents that are being controlling at this time, and there's obviously more exposure and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah, it's that requires time. That requires time to be able to speak up for yourself and set your boundaries. It's not like a very overnight thing to develop. It does need, like, going and seeing a therapist or a counselor. Um, but perhaps, while you have your studies going on, and there's family pressure for marriage or to see prospects, perhaps you can just tell them to park it on one side until the exams are over, and then have a talk with them. But not let it just come in between whatever is already going on. There's so much on the plate already, and further fretting about another issue. So just let them know that you'll come back to it, but at the moment, this is something that's really going that's really occupying your mental health, or it's impacting your mental health, and this requires your time and energy right now, and that can be looked at in a few months or in a few weeks or later. Yeah.
thank you. So I think that was basically our last question. If any of you have any parting remarks, any a bit of advice you felt you couldn't give up till now in the questions, or anything at all, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, I just want to add to this student who's asked this question. This is a very difficult place to be in, right? So as being a girl, as a woman in our culture, we don't learn how to set, or we are expected to kind of say yes to whatever is happening. If you look at the larger cultural context, to say yes, and then no matter, I can give you sort of my example, and I usually make it very open in terms of what I've gone through, or what I go through as a parent as well, and as a child, and I grew up as children as well, so that people understand that everybody goes through some of these issues. So my father was really, really big on me getting educated when none of the other girls in our family was getting educated. And then just the other day, I was talking to him about my kids, and even though whatever I am today is because of him, he did mention that but it's more important for your son, my elder one, who's actually just started LUMS, for him to have a career direction and have a career choice and stuff. And yes, it's wonderful that my younger one, my daughter, is also kind of very gung-ho about her studies and stuff, and hopefully but it's nice to hear that he's talking about having a very, so do you see the home, and how both the boy and the girl are listening to these discussions and imbibing things in them. So these are very major systemic issues that this student has brought up, and it's very hard when you're in it, because culturally you were studying until ek acha proposal aa jayega aur phir aapki shaadi ho, right? That's how it is, and it's very hard to stand against it. It's very hard to speak up and say that these are my boundaries, or this is, I don't want to do this right now. You just don't, and you kind of feel, and there's also this idea कि आपको respect करनी है, अगर आप बड़ों को ना कहेंगे, आप बोलेंगे मुझे ये करना है, तो आप disrespectful हो रहे हैं. And you at some level also believe that maybe I am being disrespectful. I can't say no to my family. So I don't have an answer to the student. That's why I was saying that it's not an easy place to be in. Find a family member, or somebody older, a mentor, an advisor in your family, someone outside amongst your parents' friends, or somebody who can help you through this, and maybe get that person to help and talk to your parents, because it will not be easy for you to talk to them directly. कोई खाला है, कोई मामी है, कोई पप्पो है, कोई cousin है, older cousin है, that your parents actually listen to. Maybe it might be a guy as well, somebody older who can then talk to your parents on your behalf. So maybe, try to find that person of support for yourself and then have that conversation through them with your parents.
Yes, thank you. I think like that's very practical advice for something that's this major or this difficult to deal with at this time. A very similar question that we had, and hopefully this will be the last, is during COVID, a lot of people have been suffering loss. So it has been it might be loss of a family member, it might be financial loss, and that is very difficult to deal with. So if you are dealing with something like that, a major loss, how do you still try and focus on academics or get into that headspace where you can like work on academics and focus on doing that?
So I'd like to share my views on that. When grief takes somebody over, it's important to process that. Yes, there are things going on in your life, but what I tell my clients, that there's going to be this half an hour or 1 hour that you can just give to yourself to grieve. Okay. There are also things that are certain, right? So you have your education going on, you have your university going on, you have your friend circle, friend support, social support. There must be a lot of other things that are there in place. So bringing your attention to that, and gratitude is about paying attention to small little positives in your life, your health, your family, your social support, um, everything. It can be as small and as big. So maybe keeping a gratitude journal to be mindful of things that
Exactly.
are so well in your life, so well aligned on an everyday basis, because our minds have a negative bias. It tends to absorb negatives, positives. So you really have to remind yourself of the positives for it to absorb and become a part of you.
Thank you so much.
Or just kind of for I'll just add, our emotions are transient. So, unpleasant emotions. Also, people are fearful that unpleasant emotions, I shouldn't be feeling them. Or wo jo thought hoti hai कि unpleasant emotions are bad, that makes it worse. So, kind of, making room for that discomfort as well, because this too shall pass. Uske liye, kind of what Nida was talking about earlier is using some mindfulness strategies. Kind of, where do I feel it in my body? What does it look like? So it's an emotion. I mean, it feels discomfort hoti hai, but that too shall pass, because emotions also, each emotion that we feel also has a purpose. Anxiety se fight, flight and freeze aa jata hai, magar if it wasn't there, and if there was a threat coming towards us, we would be killed. It actually puts us in motion. So every emotion we experience has a benefit to it. It's actually just knowing it's part of life. Grief is part of life. It is a normal emotion. Doing what's wrong with that? It's kind of accepting it is a normal emotional response, instead of thinking it's bad. Why am I feeling grief? It's unpleasant. I shouldn't feel grief. That actually makes it worse. It's making room for those emotions. And being able to talk to a therapist, processing grief is very important. Repressing emotions have a rebound effect. It makes them bigger. It makes the problem bigger. So processing allows, and processing kaise hoti hai? By vocalizing, by talking. You're processing, you're talking. And grief is, I always tell my clients, grief is like a suitcase. Initially काफी heavy होता है, it's heavy to carry, but as time is easier and easier, and it's understanding that initially you will feel those uncomfortable emotions, and that's very, very normal to do that. It's making space for that, and it's being able to process that. अगर able to focus on your you know whatever, and agar jo loved one pass hua hai uske bare mein, if you think cherishing their memory, what are those things that you did with that person? You can do that with your therapist by talking about that person. It is important to do those things. Hamara cultural context to hai na ki we grieve for the person for 40 days, and it is there for a purpose. So those things are, those rituals and those things in itself, they are therapeutic because that is required. I think that's kind of.
And like also I added that setting aside a specific time every day, so that you can come to it. You know that time's been allocated. So it's not going to overpower or take over all of your day and all of your energy all day long. It's going to be a specific time that you'll be prepared to cater to your needs. And also use art as an expression. If somebody likes to write, use that. I also suggest dance movements. Body movements are very, very therapeutic. They create expansion in the body. When you expand, your tensions and traumas and stress is released from the body. So if somebody doesn't feel comfortable, just lock your door and just give yourself some time to just free flowing, use some free flowing dance or any kind of movement. So all these things are different ways of expressing. If you can't find somebody to talk to, it's best to have somebody that you can also talk to besides a therapist. Yeah, also have some support system. But if you can't, then maybe write it down. Maybe use a voice recorder to say it out loud, to let it out. Use art. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be abstract, anything, but just let it out in some form.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for this amazing talk. I think all of us have gotten many practical tidbits that we can carry on in our life for COVID, and it was a huge honor to talk to all of you. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time out and for coming here and talking to us. And that is, I think, the end of the session. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. It was a great session.
Thank you. It was a great session. Thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.